The Con Panel, brought to you by Old Brother Productions and Norse Legion.
Hey everybody, welcome to the second episode of the Con Panel, your in-home convention. You know, obviously a lot of the conventions are, actually all of the conventions out there have been canceled and there aren't any. So what we decided to do is make this convention panel-like TV show. It's a weekly show. We're going to come on and have a really great guest. And with me as always is Paul. And Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Kevin. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. This is probably going to be the last episode I do without wearing a hat because my hair is getting really long and it's getting like crazy.
Yeah, I hear you. I have lots of product and to look as presentable as I can, which is not so great anyway. So
Yeah, I hear you. So I understand you brought somebody for the Con Panel this week. Can you tell us about our guest?
our guest is quite unique in the Star Wars universe. He was a fan just like you and I were. Grew up when we grew up, saw it, and decided to take his childhood kind of live action play Star Wars stuff and put it to the stage. He's a fantastic guy, and I'm proud to call him a friend. His name is Charlie Ross. How you doing, Charlie?
I'm pretty good. And if you take a look, you'll notice that I am wearing a hat. I'm not so much a fan of Boston as I'm a fan of not looking like Luke Skywalker 24/7, which I have at least looked that way for most of my life, but more recently, even worse in the feathered hair department over these last 2 months. Swing. Yeah. Less swing.
Yeah, well, I hear you. How are you doing with the whole coronavirus and dealing with all that? How's that going for you?
Well, I'm in Canada. I guess it's a little bit different.
How so?
It's still bad. Well, I mean, we still have all the sort of isolations in place. We're starting to release some of the isolation protocols, and yet the major things that would affect me, you can't do a convention. I had a couple of conventions that have all been postponed or canceled. Those aren't happening. And I mean, I do live shows, so I've been doing streaming stuff. You know, I did a live stream on May the 4th of the Star Wars, one-man Star Wars. And
I saw you doing the tests there and everything. Yeah.
There you are. And did one-man Pride and Prejudice. So just kind of rolling with it. And well, oddly enough, it seems to be kind of appropriate considering my whole career, if you can call it a career. There's a lot of things I planned for, a lot of things I spent lots of money on doing, like an education, which sort of came in useful when I applied it to life. But for the most part, it's all been just sort of flying by the seat of my pants.
Gotcha.
Having potential tragedy turn into sort of begrudging success.
I gotcha. I think we read you.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of dive right into it. So I did open up a little thing. So if people want to ask you questions, they might pop up in the Facebook feed, which we'll field for you.
Sure.
But just take us through the process of how this came to be, how you developed it, and how it became the beast that it is now.
Well, I mean, go back to just when everybody was watching the films, going out of the movie theater, or in my case, in about 1980, 81, maybe, I moved to a farm. We lived in a city, a Canadian city, so not massive, but I think about 100,000 people, and that would be a Canadian city. And then I moved out to a farm. On the farm, we didn't have any TV reception. We didn't have much even radio reception, but my dad had bought a VCR. I recorded off of television before I moved up to the farm, the very first Star Wars movie. So it was this treasure, this ton of treasure that I had. And, I kind of reaped the benefits of it, being able to watch it, not knowing that I would do anything with it. But just, these are really the days before, video stores, really. So I was able to watch the movie. Also, what was just crammed in there, and I read the books or the novelizations of them. And really, in this isolated world, very similar in a sense to what we do now. For me, it was by nature of how far we were away from friends and just our neighbors, miles away on
Mm.
these big farms, I spent a lot of time cramming things like Star Wars, other things as well, Lord of the Rings, but Star Wars particularly. Flash forward when I moved away from the farm and lived back in a more urban locale, a place called Nelson. And being a little older, had some exposure to doing drama. I found that I just was like a horse stuck in the stable, desperately wanting to run. I wanted to do drama, and going to university years later, studied theater, acting, a little bit useless unless you're trying to take the time to become a performer.
Okay.
And you can spend that time, and I did. I got out and tried to start working in the real world of acting, which is pretty damn daunting, especially if you're in Canada. There's not that many markets. Ingenuity and just sort of the constant reality of unemployment looming prompted me to start making my own stuff. So I made all kinds of weird things. This is just one of those things that I tried. This being Star Wars on stage, no costume, no set, no props. I was, trying this to see if it would work. And the idea of doing it came up in about 1994 when I was touring something called the Fringe Festival,
Okay.
the Fringe Circuit. Now, there's Fringe theater festivals. They go all over the world. Big Granddaddy's in Edinburgh. The biggest one in America is, I think, in Orlando. And I did this tour. I was doing a show with a group of people. And I noticed that when I was on tour, the people that were making the most amount of money and that were having the most success and freedom making something on stage were doing solo shows. One guy in particular was doing a show that was called The Scions of Hydra. It's like a lost Star Trek episode. And he did the most uncanny William Shatner I've ever known. And anyway, seeing what he was doing made me go, I must do something. It's all my own, or at least something I've adapted. So I thought, well, the history of film. We'll do the history of film. And I remember my buddy was also on tour doing a different show. We were going to university with each other at the time, but here we are in Minneapolis. And he was really saying, oh man, you got to do this, you got to do that. And he said, no, just do Star Wars, just Star Wars. And I said, nah, I don't know. I'm not sure if it would really work. Flash forward several years later, my buddy, his name's TJ Daw, he was really making inroads during these tours of Fringe festivals during the summer when we weren't in university. And he was doing really well as a solo performer, and we still knew each other very, very well. So I tried writing the history of film. Sat at a computer, and I found that I was going to go with the film I knew the best, which was A New Hope. After trying to write 5 minutes worth, I had about 35 minutes worth, and went, I don't know if it has to be the history of film. It could just be this. So I tried doing The New Hope in front of a group of people, thinking it's not going to work. And man, ever incorrect. Because even though it was a really mixed group of people that were there seeing this thing that I was doing, I mean, people knew Star Wars. I just didn't understand it. I always thought I was a little bit alone in how much I loved Star Wars, because I'd never been to a convention, but I didn't understand how much Star Wars had an effect on just a person who wasn't obviously a Star Wars geek.
Mm.
So myself and TJ, my buddy, who I was sort of using as a director, as a sounding board to put something up on his feet, to try adding little jokes in and doing really ridiculous impressions, some better than others. Anyway, whatever I could do making him laugh as I rehearsed New Hope, I started to add in Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. And suddenly I had about an hour-long production, because my plan was to take this little show and go and do a fringe festival. Fringe festivals don't have many rules, but they have a 1 hour time limit. So because of this here, the chocolate and the peanut butter rushed together. My experience of knowing Star Wars, my desire to make something of my own, and a 1 hour time limit made one man, 3 films, 1 hour, no costume, no set, no props, into what is the one-man Star Wars trilogy. And then after touring it, I was asked to go to Chicago. Went to Chicago to do the show just in this little tiny place. And for some reason, the powers that be, in other words, Lucasfilm, found out about what I was doing. They'd read reviews, and this all predates. There was a new program called YouTube, a website called YouTube that had just started going. I wasn't even on there, but I remember that there was a kid, the Star Wars kid. That kid had been sort of made fun of, in a vicious way. He was kind of making the news rounds as I was doing my thing. And there was some comparison to me and the Star Wars kid. But luckily for me, there was enough Luddites out there that didn't know how to put on a split screen a picture of the Star Wars kid as I would be live performing my bit on the news. They couldn't make those two comparison, that visual comparison. So even though they were trying to draw a comparison and make fun of me, they were just giving me exposure in the best way possible. So people came to see the show. Yeah, and Lucasfilm found out. They were cool about it. And eventually the same people that took me to Chicago said, let's go to New York. Let's do it there. When I went to New York, Lucasfilm said, let's get our legal ducks in a row. Let's get a license agreement. And they've been so good to work with, I have found. And even since the switch over to Disney, what isn't broken in this case hasn't needed to be fixed, which is lovely. So in spite of all the things that have been, all the new IP that's being created in the Star Wars universe, I'm the old school analog version. And I know that the Star Wars in 30 Minutes was done before me, but I'd never even heard of it. I found out about it after I'd started doing my show. So it was just kind of neat to kind of feel like I beat a bunch of people to the punch because so many people had an idea similar to this, but I just managed to sort of get into position before anybody else did.
That's amazing.
I heard about your show before I heard about Star Wars in 30 Minutes.
Same here, yeah.
I'd say a good 3 or 4 years before.
I think the Star Wars in 30 Minutes was sort of it was a funsy, almost a one-off. I wouldn't call it a commission, but I have a feeling it came from, was it George Lucas and, his whole crowd, they went to, was it UCLA? What was the film school that they went to?
He went to UCLA, yeah.
Okay, so it was their teacher, one of their guru profs, who they still, I guess, communicated with, talked with, still went to for probably advice and counsel. I guess some of his students had done this 30-minute Star Wars and had told George Lucas about it. George saw it. And this is really predating everything we understand as conventions and blah, 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 and fan overload. I think he really enjoyed it. They were able to do it for him. He loved it. And that was what I would call, I really shouldn't swear, but an SHIT and giggles, right? Whereas this became a bit more of I wouldn't say a serious endeavor. It's become a constant endeavor, but I never intended for this thing to be, for me, what it is, which it's 20 years almost of doing the show.
That's incredible that it's
Don't you think?
Sustained that kind of steam. And I mean that with all respect. I think I first saw you, it was just before I joined the 501st. and I saw you in New York City, right off of Broadway. I want to say it was,
Yeah,
I think it was 2005.
that's right. Yeah, it was at the Lambs Theater.
Thank you. And I remember hearing about it and then seeing it, and that actually helped accelerate me joining the 501st, because once I got into the Legion, I was like, I want to go to every one of his shows, which I pretty much did.
Yeah, I think you did actually. Well, what was funny about going to New York was that there were so many troopers available because it's city limits, and yet there was people they'd come down from Connecticut on the weekend, just to pull in a quick troop. And I don't know, it's really strange because when going to New York City, and I had done Celebration 3 just previous to going to New York. I was there in New York for 6 months. It was sort of like an extended convention in ways, which was that there was a constant connection to 501st, which incidentally I did actually have in Chicago when I was there, because I met the Midwest Garrison there.
Great guys.
First troops I ever had to my show was Kathy Van Bunigan and John Duffy. They're just two people I've known for forever, and they both came along to the sort of the first or second show, and they said, "Hey man, do you want to have us come up? We're part of the 501st." I said that would be great, and a constant now connection to what I would call my family, my brethren in Star Wars, which is the 501st, and it's cool, as you guys know, global. I didn't know that.
Right.
I had no idea. So just imagine, if you can, and I mean, I think anybody that's in the 501st can, that you come from your isolated experience growing up. Maybe you have good friends that love Star Wars like you do, or maybe you don't. But as you get older, that feeling of, am I alone, or I am alone, becomes, you get proven wrong, that there's more of us out there, and thank goodness for that.
That's wild. I know that I'm a member, or former member of the 501st. After 10 years of having the hat, or helmet in my case, it's time to kind of pass the torch. Kevin is actually an honorary member, which is pretty cool. Kev, you want to talk about that for a sec?
No, it was a great honor. I was inducted, about 10 years ago from the ECG, the Empire City Garrison. And,
yes.
Charlie, I'm assuming you've got to be an honorary member with your contributions to Star Wars.
Yeah, I do. In fact, I try not to put them up because I feel like I'm a braggart about it. But yeah, but I don't mean that in a bad way. If I can show you something pretty cool though, because I never get to show anybody. You guys want to see something?
Absolutely.
I have to take off my. Okay, well, the first thing I got that I thought was really kind of cool. I have to take my helmet this off for a second, and I'm going to show you. I won't be able to hear you, but it's a hockey jersey. Just hold on.
I personally love 501st hockey jerseys myself.
They are pretty sharp.
Yeah,
they are really sharp.
They're pretty sharp.
I have one of the first things I got was that.
This would be like the one I got from the 501st down in Oklahoma City.
What garrison's open?
Every once in a while, I get something totally awesome. Sorry, my hockey jerseys is minorly packed up, only because COVID has made us.
Now I know you're wearing a hat. Are we going to see any of this Luke Skywalker hair, or that's not going to happen?
Oh, you don't want to see it right now. I would show it to you, but no, this is just sadness. This is like Luke. This is like Luke's sweaty head Luke, after taking off his helmet on the Death Star. I always thought, dude, if you ever needed a hair wash, it's pretty bad when Luke's it looked like he had cleaner hair after getting out of the garbage chute and his hair dried off.
Nice.
Yeah, that was the thing they did like in the 70s. They stopped doing that now, whereas a character can have their hair messed up and dirty in a garbage disposal, whatever the heck they were, and then 5 minutes later you look.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's funny.
Yeah, but I mean that's the old cereal as well, because in the old cereals, the the serial films, like the hero would fall off the cliff, his hat would fall off very clearly, and when you saw him, like, in the next episode, like he suddenly appears, and there his hat's back on his head. And they obviously do that to Dad Jones, but they could fall in the water. They get out, and 2 minutes later, their hair's all slicked back, and they got a cigarette. You know, their cigarettes didn't get wet.
That's awesome. So I know that at Celebration 3, I think it was, you performed, and I believe George Lucas was in the audience. Is that not right?
Well, there's been several times, just so you know, Celebration 3.
Ah, there it is.
Anyway, I don't know if he was actually, you know, he was, I think, up in the clouds, so to speak, watching from up on high in a bar, because he was there, of course. He was also in Orlando when I was there. Did he come out? Did he come out to Los Angeles? I think he did. Did he? Celebration 4?
No, at Celebration 4, no, he wasn't there. That was my first celebration. That was my first Star Wars convention, and that's what started me in the business that I'm in. Was going to that.
Right.
I'd never seen anything like it, but I'm pretty sure George wasn't there. I think he was there at Celebration 2010 in Orlando. I think he was there for that.
Celebration 5, right?
Yeah, Celebration 5.
Well, you know the weird thing. I can tell you what happened to me, and that this is only from going to conventions because it's the only chance you'd ever have. I came off of the stage having done my show, and there in the green room where I was just coming to get a bottle of water, sitting on a couch, I can hear Jon Stewart's voice. I'm like, oh my God, Jon Stewart's here. And Jon Stewart sitting on the couch with Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, and George Lucas. And I tried to make as though I didn't exist so that I could stay in the room and just listen. And as I started to do that, I kind of started to dart my eyes around the room and realized that there was about 3 other people trying to do the exact same thing as me, which is just be in the room, make like a fly on the wall, and hope that no one tells me to get out. And I was able to just bask in being there and not being told to get out until they actually had to go on stage. So
how funny is that? Did you have any interactions with George? Did you get any feedback from George?
No, that's okay. Not direct, at least.
He's not a very talkative person. He's a very.
I don't. Yeah. Okay.
He's very shy.
Yeah, my buddy Mike worked for Jim Henson, and he worked on things like Fraggle Rock, and he did Labyrinth stuff. And Mike always wanted to meet George Lucas, and because there's always a constant association with the Muppet Workshop, Jim Henson, and a lot of George Lucas's productions. Finally, on Labyrinth, my buddy Mike knew that George would be coming to the set. So Mike thought, oh, this is my chance to meet what he figured to be like one of his fathers. And he, managed to pluck up the courage, went over to George and said, like, hello, Mr. Lucas, I'm Mike Peterson. And I just want to tell you that I'm very proud to meet you. And George just looked at him and went, yes, and walked away. Like he didn't have anything else to say. And Mike was crestfallen, but at the same time, what if people did that to you several times a day, which I'm assuming with George Lucas, it at least at some point in his life must have happened.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. There's no doubt about that. Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, I went to an event at the New York Historical Society. This was literally like a week before the Disney acquisition was announced, and they
2013, right?
It was 2012, October of 2012.
Got it. 12. Got it.
And they were doing a premiere of Red Tails, which was one of his new movies. It was actually a documentary to go with that movie, and I went to that. And as I went outside at about the same time George did, there was a crowd of people out there. Just dozens. People had nothing to do with the presentation that he had done. They had just heard the grapevine that he was in town, and there literally was at least 80 people outside waiting for him.
Jeez.
Did he take time to chat, or did he just keep going?
He signed a couple autographs. One of them was for me, and
Nice.
and he looked like he signed about, I don't know, 10 or 20 or so, and then his people kind of rushed him along.
Yeah. I always tried to, and I kick myself about it, but I've always tried to put myself in the position that somebody who was cool and famous would be coming to me and not me coming to them, because that makes me feel like, it just makes me feel silly. I don't know why, because everything inside of me wants to go to them, but I stop myself from doing it, not because I think I'm cool or anything like that, or not that I'm trying to actively play cool. I guess if I'm going to be any part of their memory in any way, to even think that I would be somehow part of their memory, I want to be uh, as a person and not some kind of bumbling fool, which I know I would be. And to that end, I've been able to meet some pretty cool people, but it's been through just waiting for the circumstances to present themselves where they notice me and come to me, and we meet each other that way. And sometimes, like in the case of George Lucas and Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher and Jon Stewart all being there, I feel like, damn, why didn't I just go there? Except I actually did. I watched things unfold whilst I was in that place, where a person came up and asked to have a photo with George Lucas, and he just kind of ignored the person who asked that. And then George Lucas's girlfriend at the time was talking to some guy who was the MC for the stage. The MC looked like he didn't know anything or care much about Star Wars, but was making this is George Lucas's girlfriend laugh. And so she's like, George, come get a picture with this guy. Come get a picture with this guy. So George did. He did. I mean, they didn't share anything. The guy he was the only one that got any FaceTime or any photograph with George, the people that were in the room. And well, there you are. That's a situation where you come very close to people, but you just don't pique their interest enough, unless your girlfriend's there or your significant other is there, to sort of draw your attention over. Some people have inside access to the people that you really want to get near, and you might only get so close. There's so many different sayings, but one of them was kind of cool, which is never meet your heroes, because it's always going to fall short of what you expect it to be. Better to see Superman flying over than to have him come down and go like, well, I really like, I like dog food for lunch or something like that. I don't really have any interest in anything you have to say. No, thanks, Superman. It's great to meet you, buddy. Yeah.
Where did that come from?
I don't know. It's just like, there was John Paul Sartre, and he had a sort of a ongoing relationship, just like through correspondence, with Charles Bukowski. Charles Bukowski was, obviously a famous American writer, and just brilliant, crazy novels. But he also did poetry, and he was doing a reading, some evening of a reading. And even though he and John Paul Sartre had this long correspondence as kind of colleagues in a sense, John Paul was there he came and watched this poetry reading that Charles Bukowski did. And then afterwards, Charles is up in his change room, and one of his friends comes up and says, hey, John's here. He wants to meet you. And Charles Bukowski, he bolted. He got out of there because he did not want to have I don't know, whatever he was comfortable with. He didn't want to have that broken. He didn't want to meet the guy and find out that he was this or he was that, or that they didn't get along, or that they started to argue about something. Whatever unwritten contract that had been written between them, that wasn't going to be breached.
That is wild. I'm the opposite. I see the celebrity and I run right towards them and I mob them and I'm awful. But
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks for making. Paul, thanks for making me feel better about that, because everything he just said depressed the freaking hell out of me.
No.
I'm just kidding.
No, like, do you know something? That there's just been opportunities in the past. I'm just trying to think if there's ever been a time where I just felt like a total idiot. I think the only time I felt like a complete moron was I had a joke that was just not, it just didn't land. And that was with Dominic Monaghan and Billy Boyd. So Merry and Pippin, two of the hobbits from Lord of the Rings. Like they'd come to see my show, my Lord of the Rings show, and but they'd only seen the first film, so they weren't able to see the rest of it. And later, afterwards, I'm chatting with them, and they asked me, "Oh, so do we have any more? You know, do we feature in your show afterwards?" And I joked and I went, "Oh, no, you guys don't appear at all in it," you know, just kind of being sarcastic. And they kind of looked, oh, and they kind of walked off. And I went, oh, I mean, oh God, okay, well, the joke didn't work. Because obviously, if they're major characters in a film and they're in my show, why wouldn't they have a major part in it? It'd be like telling Mark Hamill, you don't play, like, my show is about Luke Skywalker, right? That's basically it. So anyway, when a joke doesn't land, it's even a worse story to relate to you guys. It just feels terrible. It's like telling the story about how you struck out. That's a good story. Yeah.
You briefly just mentioned one of your other one-man shows. What other shows do you have for those that don't know?
Well, if I can shamelessly plug my website, which is charlesstewartross.com. I do one-man Lord of the Rings, one-man Batman, which is one-man Dark Knight. Do one-man Avengers, one-man Pride and Prejudice, which is it's like totally what it is. It's the 1995 miniseries, so it's more of a women's show. And then I do one-man Stranger Things, and I'm working on one-man Harry Potter right now. But I also have a show that I've done a few times, which is called 421 is Dead. And I mean, that's like it's TK421. It's the story of TK421. But when I went to Disney and said, here's my show, we've performed it just sort of under the radar. Can we license it? They had to go to me. They said, actually, somebody's put TK421 in a tiny piece of fiction that we commissioned, and it's there in the background, so you can't. So I went, oh,
wow.
So what do I do? And they said, well, just change the title. We're not going to shut you down. So instead of being TK421 is Dead, it's called 421 is Dead. So it's kind of a pisser, because if somebody comes to my show, I have to make people work just a little bit harder to get the fact that this is TK421.
Have you thought about making it TK422, and he could be the other stormtrooper that went on the Millennium?
Well, that's funny, because it's actually his best friend is TK411.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I can send you the script if you ever want to take a look over it, because it's the story of TK421 and TK411. 421 gets killed, but it's actually the story of TK411, who he's actually one of the smartest guys that's still left on the Death Star. And it's weird, because the story is that their lives, they're actually imprisoned, willing prisoners. TK411, despite being incredibly intelligent, doesn't realize he's a prisoner. He does this job where for 40 minutes at a time, he guards the garbage chute. For 5 minutes, he's allowed to have food. So he gets these little microdots that gives him all the things he needs to eat. And then for the next 15 minutes, he has a moment of relaxation and sometimes sleep. His whole day in perpetuity is broken into 40 minutes of work, 5 minutes of eating, and 15 minutes of rest and relaxation. That's how this show works. Now, it doesn't actually go in real time, but this loudspeaker goes 40, and then the guy is guarding a garbage chute, and then 5, he's eating, And then for 15, he's resting and relaxing. And he has interaction with a couple things. TK421, who's the poster boy for the Empire, and a little tiny greebly monster that he's nicknamed Mince, who's the garbage chute monster from A New Hope. And the whole point of this is that it's actually going in time with the original New Hope movie. So TK421 dies within my show. The show is exactly 1 hour long. And they both get off the Death Star. They get off before it's blown up. So it's just about these two guys that grew up together, that became stormtroopers, that became prisoners, that get away. And even though TK421 is dead, his brain and his memory and his soul, his spirit, everything they talk about in the Force is actually downloaded into a mouse droid, and they take the mouse droid and they leave the Death Star together. So anyway, it's a ridiculous show. And
That's hilarious. Are you kidding me?
with any luck, I'll get a chance to do it at a convention at some point, so people can get a chance to see what it's all about. But it's weird because it takes a second for people to realize, but once they do, it's full of inside jokes, of course. And it's just me and my buddy that do it. So
that's one of my favorite parts of any of the shows. I've seen you do 2 shows. I was lucky enough, you performed, I think it was in New Haven, and you gave us a sneak preview of the Lord of the Rings thing. But there's always some sort of little inside joke with the shows that I've seen you do, and that makes it even better when you're a fanboy. If you're not a fanboy, what's that?
Wow, no, you're right. I'm just if you're not a fanboy, you might be. It's a bit of a head scratcher. But that's always the great thing. You know that this is what happens. It's like watching Monty Python for the first time. Your dad's laughing, and you go, "Why is Dad laughing?" I want to know why Dad's laughing, and he's not going to tell you why he's laughing. You have to learn. You have to go to school. You have to expand your brain until your brain gets big enough that you begin to understand the references. And my show is full of the fanboy stuff that, do your homework. Waste the time. Waste your time watching stuff until you understand what the inside joke is. And then it's yours to enjoy.
Absolutely. Before we actually have a few viewers that have questions, but I wanted to ask, and it's a really silly question. I'm sure you get it asked all the time, but what is your favorite character to portray?
Well, it's funny. I do recall the enjoyment, the excitement of learning how to do Akbar or Jabba. I didn't quite realize it was going to work out to be quite so good. But I think the Emperor is really my favorite because he's such a sarcastic jerk. And I had no idea, once again, that it would work out quite so well, my silly impression of doing the Emperor.
Your impression's amazing. Your Luke impression's spot on. It's spooky watching you because you really do embody them, even though it's humorous. You completely embody each character. I mean, even things that aren't characters, like TIE fighters going,
Yeah. Well, but that's part of it as well, is that when you're an 8-year-old kid, you don't worry about whether or not you can be a firefighter, and the fire engine. You just become the firefighter and the fire engine. So even though you're pretending to be the fire engine, you'll adopt some kind of, look, I'm the fire engine, and when you're the TIE fighter, you're just becoming it. It doesn't matter if you get it perfect. In fact, even though it's not perfect, that's actually kind of what makes it perfect, I think.
Since you brought it up, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you think you can give us a little bit of the Emperor?
Oh, I could. He doesn't wear a hat. We'd be like, "Oh no, my young apprentice, it is you who find the tar mistaken about a great many things. It was I who allowed the Alliance to know the location of the shield generator. It is quite safe from your pitiful little band. An entire legion of my best troops awaits them. Oh, I'm afraid the deflector shield will be quite operational when friends arrive." Anyway, it's better when you have a microphone, but there it is.
No,
such-
what I love about it is that you just did about 3 different scenes of his crammed into one almost, right? And that's what makes
And that's
it an interesting story.
Yeah, that's the weird thing, is that my version makes me watch the old movies and go like, oh, God, they sure could be shorter, you know. But I mean, I'm glad they aren't. But yeah, sometimes the editorial jumps that are taken, it's like, here's the beginning of one of Lando's lines and the end of another line or a paragraph, you know, the speech, and you bridge, 15 minutes together. And suddenly, like, my own little sort of monologue, my own little paragraph is what smashes it all together. You know, the cool thing is, and I didn't appreciate it at the beginning, was how well people could fill in the blanks. And if you guys are in any way aware of, there's a psychology exam for people that have had certain parts of their brain injured by a stroke. They take lines and 2 dots, and they're arranged on a piece of paper that looks like a tiger. Then the same amount of lines and dots are on another piece of paper, but all out of sequence. They're just there, all jumbled. A person with certain injury to their brain will look at the pattern of the tiger, and they'll look at the non-pattern, but the lines and dots, and they will not see the pattern of the tiger. They can't fill in the blanks. They can't see the pattern. And there's people that don't know Star Wars at all. They can't fill in those blanks. But for people that know Star Wars well enough, they can make those massive jumps. They can fill it all in. They're picking up what I'm putting down, and they are truly along for the ride that my show is taking them on.
Yeah, and if you're going to pick a movie, I mean, yeah, Gone with the Wind maybe sold more tickets, and was Avengers has brought in more revenue. But the movie that's been seen the most in the world is Star Wars. There's no question.
You're right, and it's the amount of, I think if somebody sat down and tried to collate the amounts of times that people have spent perfectly beautiful sunny days inside in the cold, breathing recycled air, watching Star Wars. The amounts of times, I mean, we're talking billions of human hours that have been, assigned to that. And I'm sure if we took that same amount of time and applied it to how to figure out alternative energies, we'd all be flying light speed to other galaxies already, but we didn't.
No, I agree with you. And, we started this show, the Con Panel. It's not a Star Wars show. It's a show to do, to get guests from many different genres. And our first 3 actors are from Star Wars, and next week's actor is from Star Wars. But the week after that will be somebody else. So
that's cool.
Yeah, Star Wars is ubiquitous.
Yeah, it is. But, the weird thing is when I remember then going on to try to figure out what's the next film that I could do in this particular style. To me, Lord of the Rings just seems an obvious thing, not only because I knew them and read the books, but then these films are coming out, and then the execution of the films, to me, even though there's all these different things that have been changed, they were still exquisite. I mean, when could I possibly hope to get something that was that high of quality? It was never going to happen. So this was a perfect opportunity. I avoided doing Harry Potter as an adaptation, only because I knew these guys that were doing a show called Potted Potter. And I thought, I'm not going to step on their toes. I mean, that sort of has somewhat evolved over time. And my buddy, the guy I told you about who did the show called Signs of Hydra, that did the Perfect Kirk show. This guy's name is Mike Sheldemos. He's one of my best friends in the world. He's also the guy that designed the lights for my show that I do now, the Star Wars show, and the Lord of the Rings show. Anyway, I've never touched Star Trek only because he still does the best Kirk impression. And if I was to try to do a Kirk impression, it would only be me trying to do my best impression of Mike doing his perfect impression of William Shatner.
It would be difficult to choose a movie that's as quotable as Star Wars, that it's had as many views as Star Wars. Maybe I don't know. It might be funny to do Rocky and just get punched repeatedly.
Yeah, it's just at some point I would be fighting myself and my desire to start to tear it a new butthole, as
What about
opposed
Jaws?
to. I beg your pardon?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought you were done, but I was going to say, what about Jaws?
Ooh.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, at some point, Jaws goes from quality to uh, it's kind of it's this ridiculous thing that's been made that even the actors that are in it have never even bothered to watch. So,
Hmm.
I would at some point begin to lose the love, and it would become such pure parody or mockery that I think what I have with, say, the Lord of the Rings show and the Star Wars show is that at its very heart is the love, the unsullied, the simple love that I think a lot of us had for Star Wars when we first watched it, for Lord of the Rings, perhaps when we first read it, or even watched the movies. Hopefully, not viewing with such a critical, cynical eye, that that I think hampered people's ability to love, say, the new offerings that have come to the Star Wars universe, or even like the Hobbit films that were made. People become almost Frankenstein monsters. We become somewhat corrupted because we expect lightning to be captured again in a jar, and that we can love something the way we did when we were kids. So yeah, doing Rocky would be awesome if it was just their first Rocky, or maybe 1 and 2, maybe
Mhm.
1, 2, and 3, or doing like Alien 1 and 2, or doing Back to the Future, obviously, doing Indiana Jones 1, 2, and 3. I would just give number 4 a bit of a miss personally, and that's just my own opinion. The thing is, I don't want to start inciting arguments or pissing people off, because it's like then you lose the sense of what the show is. Even doing my Stranger Things show currently, it's only seasons 1 and 2, and the reason why I'm only doing seasons 1 and 2 is because I'm waiting for season 4 to come out before I then adapt season 3 and 4 into my show and make it probably closer to a 2-hour show.
Right.
There's just so many opportunities to start criticizing something and finding the mean spiritedness of it, whereas I'm trying to focus on the love. And even when I poke fun at the old Star Wars, it's lovingly poking fun at it, rather than trying to be mean spirited, because where's the value in that, you know?
I yeah, totally understand. It's taken on its own life. Your show has taken on its own life, which is amazing. I seem to have a memory, and correct me if I'm wrong, where you were thinking of retiring the show.
Yeah, I was thinking of it. I think of it every once in a while. I'm just like a really bad. It's funny that you should mention Kevin the Rocky, because Rocky should have retired so long ago, right? Obviously, before he became completely punch drunk, and obviously, I should have retired it. I'm so glad that I didn't. I guess
We
what I
are
started
too.
to do is, well, at some point, there's a really critical voice inside of you that starts to question your motivation for continuing something. And I'm really glad that destructive voice that's inside your head, or in this case, inside of my head, I didn't let it take over. So yeah, I guess what's just happened is sometimes we ebb and flow. We have our peaks and valleys, and I guess I was kind of feeling in the bottom of that trough, looking at the height of the next wave and whatever might be behind it or at the top of it. And I just didn't know what was going to be involved, and I even started to think that people might judge me for continuing to do something, not just that my family or my colleagues, but just people that I love, like yourself included. I mean, I don't know what people are thinking, and it's a difficult thing doing a solo show when you really only have your voice as your counsel, and it starts to say terrible things to yourself. At some point, you have to say, "Shut up, me." Let's start saying some nice things again.
When you do your show, do people buy tickets for it?
Yeah, yeah,
Then
they
keep doing
do.
it. Then keep doing it.
Yeah,
The audience is happy. You got.
it's absolutely as simple as that. I think what it came down to, Kev, is that somebody had said to me, it reminded me, and it was such a simple thing. It's just such a duh moment. But people just said to me, I don't remember who it was exactly, that it said that this is some kid's first time seeing you. And every time you do the show, it's their first time. You don't experience it because you become jaded. What to me is somebody sitting in a seat, even it could be their birthday, and they're coming to see my show for the first time. I lost sense of what the little moment of magic that not only my show is, but it's the moment of where your chocolate meets my peanut butter. Your experience of Star Wars, we're about to share something that's unique, and not to say that I'm Yoda. It's just that I know that in this moment of doing the Star Wars show that I do, this is the only time people can see it for the first time. And I'm part of making that first time for every person. So if I can just experience the wonderful Zen love of knowing that my infectious love is truly finding people that are willing to get infected, it's happening, in the theater that I bring in. So yeah, people buying tickets, people are coming to the show, people are loving what they're getting a chance to see, and I'm loving getting a chance to do it. So yeah, I learned to become a little bit more in awe of what the privilege I have of doing this show is.
Your comments remind me of one thing. When I saw it, both times when I saw it, and I don't want to give anything away, but there's a part where you do, as throughout the whole episode, you do something funny, and then when you did it repeatedly, and both times I saw it, you yourself were laughing like you've seen it the first time, and it's almost like after you tell a joke 100 times, it just can't be funny, but yet you were still laughing, which was giving us permission to laugh, and I always thought that was a really cool part.
It's funny to say that because I don't know why, but okay, if you're a comedian or if you're ever doing a live show and you keep trying to set up a joke for yourself, jokes work in threes. So a lot of times I do a joke, I plant a seed, I revisit the little seedling later, and later I'm going to come up to this big honking bush. And when it works, it is such a joy because I'm going to make you laugh. And I get to enjoy the thrill of making you laugh. It works.
You're about to spoil it. I think you figured out.
No.
I know talking about which part.
I know what it is, but it's just that when it works, it's such an awesome thing, and it truly is. And even when I'm through my cynical periods of time, I have still laughed. If we're talking about the same moment, I've still laughed because. My show, unlike other shows, doesn't have the fourth wall. Or when it's there, when I'm pretending to just be there and not see you, it's a pretty thin. It's a screen door. It's not a wall. So I put it up sometimes for the artifice, but I'm pretty quickly going like batting up against the screen door, and then I burrow a little hole, and then I rip it open, and then I pull you in. To have that screen door kind of fourth wall working and then ripping it open, throwing it away, makes me feel like a kid, literally like a kid, in that I didn't believe in a lot of rules when I was a kid. And to sort of act out, in this case, literally act out on stage and be able to entertain people, and reconnecting with this bad kid that got kicked out of class a lot, which I did. Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of Star Wars, though, isn't it? It still makes us feel young. We still can have those moments where it's like watching it for the first time. For whatever reason, Star Wars fans have that. And your show reminds us of that and puts that 6-year-old mentality kind of spin on it, which I think is brilliant. That's what makes it so great. I was that kid too. We all relate to you, Charlie, which I
Yeah.
think is
Well,
fantastic.
and more importantly is I relate to you,
Well,
for me. Yes.
how
Paul, do we have any more online questions? Since
we
you're the one-
do. Actually, it's from an acquaintance of mine that I think Charlie knows. It's from Chris Fian, who's from one of the
Yeah.
garrisons in New York. And he
Yeah,
asked,
I just saw something from you there, Chris, earlier on Facebook. It was the autograph, like the real signatures or whatever it was. Sorry, forgive me.
that's fine. He asks if there's a chance that you could bring the trilogy back to New York City at some point after, obviously, the COVID's passed.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was actually engaged to go to do the show in New York. My agent and manager, there's a theater that's sort of more in the village that he operates. It's the Office musical, and it's a smaller theater. And I think I'll have an opportunity to come to my show there potentially sooner than you might think. And here's an interesting thing: when we're doing live shows now, we're hoping to be able to sell more tickets, have a live audience that are socially distancing within the theater, providing the live theater environment and the noise, but also being able to sell tickets to people who can only watch from a remote place.
Mhm.
So selling tickets to be able to watch people we'll stream the show to those people. So you'll see a live show. And I know New York has done that for a long time at the opera and in live shows and Broadway. But in this case, to have actual people in an audience will still need to maintain those distances. And a show that's small like mine still works with 50 people, I think.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for answering his question. A lot of people saying that they've seen your show and they love it, which I think is great. And to Pete Sullivan, who's watching, I am not going to talk about Carrie Fisher.
Ah, good.
I've told that story too many times and I don't want to revisit it.
Okay.
Kevin, you had any closing thoughts?
Yeah, we talked about his favorite character to perform, but Charles, I was wondering, do you have a favorite character overall from Star Wars? You can even do the prequels.
Favorite character, hey? It's the character that I probably will get sliced and diced, but it's the whole character of Anakin insofar as that he was a boy that became corrupted, who when we first watched the initial Star Wars, he was just sort of the super badass baddie. There wasn't we didn't know the background of Anakin Skywalker so much. He then becomes fleshed out and that he has way more connection to Luke. And then there's a sense of redemption. Only with knowing the full story of Anakin do we really have an idea of how far he's fallen. And I think that if we're looking at the story as an epic story, and take out episodes, the latter episodes here now with Rey, the story of Anakin, the epic fall, and not of the Skywalkers, but of Anakin is so sad. So sad. And even his redemption is still a sad thing and poignant. As far as the character that I find to be utterly fascinating and beautiful, it's probably Anakin, because everybody that comes into contact with him, Obi-Wan, Palpatine, obviously Luke, it's their connection to Anakin and all the human and the corrupted parts of him, the corrupted Jedi, the dark person, the dark and the light fighting back. Even though there's the redemption of Anakin at the end, it's truly, you can't forget what atrocities that kind of a person has committed. And yet somehow, even in your child's heart, you want that person to be good. You want to find some kind of goodness in them. If not to sort of say, well, you're fine, come along, we forgive you like a professional wrestler, that's been a bad guy for 10 years. We now love you more than anything, even though you smashed a chair over somebody's head. In the case of Anakin, here's a person that's been a mass murderer, and yet the thing that you loved about him, or maybe found annoying, but the child quality, the child that was Anakin in episode 1 still has some element, some portion of who Anakin is when he's has that helmet come off. Is when I was a kid, I just held on to the idea that there was still some kind of human quality. And I will, just to end, the reason I think why Anakin's become such a big part of what I love the most about Star Wars was that in the novelization, it was something that was changed that they didn't have in the movie. So I'm assuming it came afterwards, but the author of it, the ghost author, the person who did the novelization, had the first words that Anakin says to Luke when his helmet is taken off is not, "Now go, my son, leave me." He says, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter." And he's echoing, obviously, Yoda, but that's what he's saying. And that for all of us, when we become older, we become different than what we were when we were children. That there's still that underneath all the masks that we wear, all the affectations that we have, that there's still something that's innocent, that's beautiful, that's simple, that's not been corrupted, if you can call it that. And that's the thing that we need to remember, that there's still a connection in spite of all of those, all the gray, that there's still something light on either side of it that, it's important to reconnect with. I guess that's why Anakin's my favorite character.
Well, I think you're silly, and it's Chewbacca's the best. And wow,
Yeah.
that was deep, dude. You went deep.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean
No,
to.
no, that's great.
I kind of have to agree because my favorite character is Vader, and I got a big Vader statue right behind me there. So
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Yeah. Well, and that's, you can't really have Anakin without Vader. It's the war within and under the mask, which I thought was so cool. That it was something that they pointed out in the first making of Star Wars documentaries I ever saw.
Mhm.
Was the power of actors to act from beyond the mask, and they were showing Vader. They were showing, so you have David Prowse, but then you also had the movement of the camera to create drama. But you have like Chewbacca being able to sort of emote from just using his eyes,
Right.
And it's incredible that we can do that. And I mean, I studied theater in university, and we worked with mask. And I understood now that a lot of times what film is and what we bring to the story is what we endow that character with from our own experience. We project deeper feelings. I think that's why film works in a way that we don't quite realize that unless we buy in, we aren't necessarily touched by a film as deeply as we are until we've actually bought in. And that's the kid inside of us.
Brilliantly stated. Brilliantly stated.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely. Wow, I have to like I got to breathe for a second. That was good stuff.
well, it's an interesting point to end on, and because we're coming up on an hour now, and that's the length of our show.
Okay.
So, Charles, I wanted to thank you for coming, and but also wanted to so you get your pen and paper down if you're watching. To get his website down, if you could say your website again, so we can have people come by and see you. And
you can check me out at onemanstarwars.com. That's all lowercase, all letters, onemanstarwars.com. Or you can check out charlesstuartross.com, CharlesStuartross.com. And yeah, email me at charlie@onemanstarwars.com if you ever want to say hello or tell me.
You might get a lot of answers with that.
I'm totally.
Sorry?
Oh, I'm not giving you my phone number, but you're totally welcome to contact me that way.
And Paul, we'll make sure we get all those in the show notes and everything as far as the links for the show. Make sure that we have his email and so forth. You guys can check it there.
Absolutely. All righty, folks. Well, that concludes the episode. Kevin, who do we have next week?
Next week we have a Jawa with a very interesting story. That's all I want to say right now. We haven't. I just want to make sure that he's confirmed. He's coming, but he's going to come on, and he's got a really cool story to tell. And then a week after that, you don't even know this. We got. Well, I'll tell you offline. But we got somebody good for the weekend after.
Beautiful. All right, folks. That's my cue to do the outro. Charlie, thank you so much, buddy.
Thank you, guys, and may the force be with you all.